I was talking to a friend a few weeks back who asked when the Docklands Light Railway opened. I said 1987. He said he couldn't believe such a modern system could be so old. Well, I don't want to give my age away too much. I'm old enough that that's a depressing thing to hear. Nevertheless, the fact is that the DLR has been around for over 3 decades now, and in that time it's seen a lot of changes. It even has a couple of abandoned stations at Mudchute and Island Gardens. The one at Island Gardens is particularly interesting because it actually replaced another abandoned station. So you have 2 abandoned stations literally right next to each other. Let's start at the beginning. The first station on this site was North Greenwich, which was here, on the Isle of Dogs. This should not be confused with North Greenwich on the Jubilee line, which is some distance away on the opposite side of the river. Calling this station North Greenwich was another of those railway cheats where they'd name a station after somewhere more prestigious. To get to Greenwich proper from here, you'd have to take the ferry or later on the foot tunnel. The railway also operated the ferry, selling tickets to, as they described it, South Greenwich, which was pretty cheeky in my opinion. The station was built by the Millwall Extension Railway. This was kind of a spin-off from the London and Blackwall Railway, which I talked about in a previous video that I'll link below if I remember. The Millwall Extension Railway was a joint venture between the London and Blackwall and the dock companies. It ran from Millwall Junction to North Greenwich, and it's interesting enough to justify an entire video to itself, so I won't go into too much depth just yet. What I will say for now is that Millwall Junction was actually in Poplar, so both ends of the railway were a lie, kind of. In reality, this area was called Cubitt Town. It was named after William Cubitt, the engineering contractor who developed the area, who was also responsible for Covent Garden Market and the original version of Euston Station. Cubitt Town was built as a workers' town for the dockers and their families. In fact, tickets to North Greenwich Station had Cubitt Town printed on them in brackets, because I guess the railway realised they weren't fooling anyone. The original station building was disappointingly plain and unembellished, made mostly out of wood. There was also an engine shed here. The station was approached by way of a viaduct, which you can still see in Millwall Park. The line was never all that popular. The main source of traffic was dock workers, with occasional boosts when Millwall Football Club had a home match. In 1910, Millwall, the football club, not the place, moved over the river to Bermondsey, and over the next couple of decades, bus services would poach most of the regular passengers. In 1926, during the general strike, passenger services were quietly withdrawn and the end section of the railway was closed. In 1937, the viaduct was partially demolished, unfortunately resulting in the death of someone beneath one of the arches, although I'm afraid I haven't been able to find any more details about this. The station building was used as the boathouse for Poplar, Blackwall and District Rowing Club until it was knocked down and replaced with a new purpose-built headquarters in 1970. In the 1960s, the docks went into decline with significant impact on the local area. So much so that in 1970 the Isle of Dogs actually seceded from the UK in protest. I did a video on this, which again, link below if remember. One of the major complaints residents had was the lack of transport. At this time the area was only served by a single bus route with nothing by way of rail transport. In 1980 the Docklands Light Railway was authorised to help with the regeneration of the area. One of the first sections authorised was a line that would more or less duplicate the old Millwall Extension Railway. In fact, from Cross Harbour to Island Gardens it would follow the same route, and the section from Mudchute to Island Gardens would reuse the remains of the old viaduct. Island Gardens station would be right next to the site of the old Greenwich North Station here. In fact, in the early days the planners considered naming the station North Greenwich, as well as the more accurate Cubitt Town. In the end, they selected Island Gardens after the Riverside Park. The station was elevated, built at the end of the viaduct itself in a sort of V-shape. The architecture was the standard modular design used elsewhere on the DLR, with a rotunda similar to the one at Tower Gateway. The line along the viaduct was single track, unusual for a mass transit system in London. If I'm talking about Island Gardens, I should probably talk about the incident that took place on the 10th of March 1987 before the line was opened. Test runs were being carried out, and that night this happened. Ironically, for a line that famously doesn't use drivers, the accident was caused by human error. There were 3 people on board and the train was being driven manually. Unfortunately, automatic equipment to stop the train hadn't yet been installed and the train ploughed straight through the buffers. Luckily, no one was hurt. Despite all this, almost immediately after the DLR opened, people started asking about an extension. Specifically, the councils south of the river thought it would be just super if the DLR could run all the way to Lewisham, passing through Greenwich and Deptford along the way. This, they hoped, could stimulate economic development, much as had occurred in the Docklands. In 1990, the extension was authorised with the aim of opening in 1995. This being a British transport project, it actually opened in 1999. The extension would run through a tunnel under the river, and in order to do that, the alignment of the railway would have to change. Mudchute, Island Gardens and the viaduct line would need to go, which they did in 1999. The old Island Gardens was replaced with a new one in a tunnel, which is what you've been looking at. The old station was demolished completely. Now a housing and retail development, as you can see, sits in its place. Sadly, there's nothing to see of either station today. In fact, if it weren't for the viaduct that just abruptly ends, you wouldn't know there had even been a railway here at all. Hello all, I hope you enjoyed this demolished, rebuilt and demolished video. There's a like button if you did, and you may wish to share or even subscribe. That would be jolly nice of you. And I'll see you again very soon. Cheerio.